Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to the final class. We're going to be kind of moving through a lot of things. I'm going to continue to tell the story of the Lewis and Clark expedition and what follows after it, and that'll make sense of the title, I hope. But to begin, why don't we start with the word? Open our ears, God. Open our eyes. Help us to think new thoughts. Guide us in our expression, and help us to see plans for the long term for our church and our life together. In Christ I pray. Amen. So if you were able to be here last week. It was a long week. It wasn't a long week. It wasn't that long. It was a long week. We're getting close to the deadline for this affiliation, so I've got some long days ahead of me for the next couple of weeks. If you were here last week, you know I told the story Canoeing the Mountains about the Lewis and Clark expedition, made up of a lot of river pilots, fur trappers from the Great Lakes region, people, Navy people who understood how to navigate rivers and that sort of thing. And they thought they were just going to cross the Rockies, or they didn't know the Rockies existed. They thought they were just going to portage their canoes from one river to another and find their way down to the Pacific. And they discovered the Rocky Mountains. And they had to develop new skills and new talents. And used it as a metaphor to talk about some of the skills the church needs to develop at this point in its life. We're going to continue with that same theme. This week we want to look at, last week if you recall we talked about assets, those sorts of things. This week we want to talk about processes that are important for churches to always have in place around vision and mission and organizing your ministry. And I'll continue to use the story of Lewis and Clark to kind of illustrate that. On their way back from the Pacific Ocean, the Lewis and Clark expedition actually broke into different parts. Some of the members of the expedition went off on their own. One part of the expedition actually with Lewis and Clark in it took a more northerly route, and another one took a slightly more southerly route, and its leader was a guy named John Colton. And as his expedition in 1807, 1808 was winding back, they came across a bit of country where they saw things that they had never seen before. The ground was steaming. There were these incredibly hot pools of water. Every once in a while, one would shoot up in the air. There were these giant mud things that were incredibly hot, constantly plopping and plopping and plopping. And he came back to the east and he wrote about this and he described it. And there really was not, this is still prior to the telegraph and the beginning of industrialization. So it made a little kind of information out there, and people enjoyed hearing the stories of what they called Coulter's hell. Because he described it as being like hell on earth. It looked like his image of hell. And, it kind of caught the imagination. Then, about 20 years later, a guy named Joseph Lafayette Meeks is one of the early pioneers out west, and he comes across this same area again. And he describes these same things, kind of comes back east, and it builds up a little fascination among people, this thing that's being described. And then you get into the 1830s and 1840s, and more people are pressing out west, and more people are discovering not only this place that at the time was referred to as Coulter's Hell, but also other great sites of the West, right? Just the Mississippi River itself, but some of the other great places that are now part of our national park system. And excitement built and built, but then in the 50s, 1850s, it tailed off, and obviously we understand why the country turned inward as it was preparing for the Civil War and that great tragedy. But when that was over, there was a famous newspaper publisher, Horace Greeley, who wrote a famous, probably one of the most famous quotes in all of American newspaper publishing, "Go west, young man, and find the free country," 1865. And so there was a renewed sense of people going out there. And at this point, this place that was early on called Coulter's Hell had really kind of kind of stuck, and more people had seen it. And there were several expeditions specifically going there. Washburn expedition, the Langford Dunn expedition, they all kind of merged up in the late 1860s, and they explored this region that was well known to the native people, had been for centuries, and was a place where in the wintertime they would typically camp and do their winter hunting because of the warmth of the springs would attract animals. And it really kind of, the reports coming back east just continued to fire the imagination of people, including one, there was a guy named Truman Everett, and he was out there and he got lost from the expedition. He was lost for like 37 days. And when he was done and they found him, he was emaciated, he was like 90 pounds, they nursed him back to health, and he wrote up this kind of serial about his life and his experience, you know, how he saw native people and all these things he saw. And it got published in a magazine back east. This is 1870, called Scribner's Monthly, which was at the time the magazine everyone in the East read. And it just, that was it. That was really took it over the top. And everybody said, we've got to see this place, which you and I know, and you probably have guessed what it is. It's what they started referring to as the Yellowstones. And in 1871, there was so much excitement, and it reached such a fever pitch, the world's first national park, a new idea no one had ever thought of before, was established, Yellowstone National Park. So something completely new had come into the world because people had gotten some interest. So, have you been to Yellowstone?
Yep. Yeah.
You've been then, cold as hell. That's the sense, so now you know the piece of that. But the story of what happens now is, I think, really illustrative of what churches need to be thinking about and wrestling with in their lives, particularly as we talked about over the last 4 sessions. We're in this incredibly fast-moving, change-oriented time. And so, once the national park is established, this sort of hue and cry goes up in the newspapers and in the Eastern media and among the people that you've got to see the Yellowstones. We've got to find a way for more people to see the Yellowstones. And that is a vision statement. People need to see the Yellowstones. What is a vision statement? A vision statement is a goal that a community of people hold in common. Something they want to see happen. That's all a vision is. That's all a vision statement is. So, a group of people, citizens of the United States basically, Easterners in the United States, caught this vision, this energy and excitement and enthusiasm for this new thing kind of built up in them, and they wanted to see it. What's the vision statement of this congregation? What's your vision?
Live the example of Jesus.
Live the example of Jesus. That's what you want to see happen. Churches need to constantly be thinking about and running everything they do through their vision. How are the ministries of the church aligning to your vision? Is this helping us to live the example of Jesus? If not, is this something we should be doing? One of the things that happened in my time at Holland First is they chose to become a reconciling congregation. And when they took that step, they advertised it in the community. They joined the actual organization, Reconciling Ministries, and they have a distinctive logo, and they got the logo that they put on their doors. You have your doors out front. And then they started thinking about how they needed to align all of their ministries to represent that truth so people would know and understand who we were, and all of the things we did were intentionally designed to be affirming of all people. So, here's one of the things that happens when you do that. We had a couple come in. It was in February when we had chosen, February 2019, when we chose to become a reconciling ministry. 4th of July weekend 2019, a couple comes in, and they seemed like nice people. They had just moved to the Holland area. They were United Methodists. They were United Methodists from Texas, and he had been moved by his company up here to Holland, Michigan, and so they came to the Methodist church. You know, this was their first Sunday in the community, and they were good United Methodists. And they came to a United Methodist church that was nothing like the United Methodist church that they were a part of back in Texas. And they heard us talking about who we were and what we believed in. And when the service was over, I made a beeline to greet them because they had come in and they had warmly greeted me and wanted the pastor to know that there were good United Methodists there. And as I kept moving across the sanctuary to get to them, they kept moving faster. The temptation, right? Oh, the visitor's here. How do we get them in? How do we make them a part of us? No, the challenge is, how do we live out our vision? How do we align thoughtfully to who we are passionate about? And then the people who align to that will find us. And as you live into your vision, you might grow to be a larger church. You might not. But you have something you're passionate about. Does anybody know the mission statement of the United Methodist denomination? I think it's still a mission statement. Sherry. Oh, I thought it was a mouthful.
To make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
To make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That's actually, I would argue, two statements. Write it down. To make disciples of Jesus Christ for transformation of the world. That's a vision statement and a mission statement together. Can you see it? That's a vision. That's where we want it. We who call ourselves United Methodists, we're looking for a transformed world. Our process for getting that is making disciples of Jesus Christ. Hear the difference? A vision statement is that common goal you all have in order. A mission statement is the way you're going to get to your goal. That's the difference. A few years ago, I know you have a governing board here, so you probably did the Vital Church Initiative a few years ago, and they gave you a little blue book with a boat on, thin little book, I think, with a boat on the cover. Did you get that? About vision and mission. Good. If they did give it to you, throw it away. It's really just, it was, when I first read it, I said, this is the worst book about vision and mission I ever read. Mission is the pathway you're going to take to achieve your vision. That's all it is. So, as United Methodists, we want a transformed world. We believe if we make disciples of Jesus Christ, we'll get there. Your vision as a church is to be the example of Jesus Christ. How are you going to get there? Did you put together a mission to get you there?
Yes,
What's the mission?
it's the 5 practices.
Okay. What are the 5?
Oh, let's see. Radical hospitality,
Yep.
extravagant generosity,
risk-taking mission.
Risk-taking mission service.
Yeah.
Passion, worship,
That-
and intentional faith development.
Intentional faith development. Everybody knows that?
Don't know.
We know it, but not memorized.
Yeah.
The banners are in the gym, it
Yep.
just say it on our website.
Andy Stanley, North Point Church down in the Atlanta area, one of the biggest churches in the country, says, if either your mission or your vision is longer than 7 words, you don't have it yet. Because you should be able to just know it. Everybody who's a part of the organization should be able to know it and just go back to it ever as quickly as they need to. Let's go back to the 1800s. People needed to see the Yellowstone. That was the vision statement. How do you do it? In 1846, there was a guy named John Barnard. He painted one of the most famous paintings in history that is now completely forgotten because it was a lousy painting. He was a lousy artist. But what made it spectacular is the canvas was 18 feet tall and 3 miles wide.
Wow.
He painted, does anyone know this story? He painted the Mississippi River. He spent 3 years on a boat going down the Mississippi River, painted highlights of the Mississippi. He was not a great painter, but he had the canvas on this enormous set of rolls. Then he came back east and he started booking halls where he could show it. It was like watching a movie. It would take 2.5 hours and you would sit there and the canvas would roll along and then he would highlight things. It made the man rich beyond the dreams of avarice, right? He had a plan. He said, oh, this is my mission. People are excited to see these Western things. It's the 1840s. I'll paint the Mississippi River so people can see that. And it worked beyond his dreams. In the 1870s, now older, he thought, I think I need to go out and paint the Yellowstones. He never got there. But that was his mission to achieve the vision. Buffalo Bill Cody. Have you been out to Yellowstone? You went through the town of Cody, Wyoming, didn't you? Buffalo Bill Cody said to himself, you know what? People are excited about this place. I'm going to start a town here. Eventually, it started very slowly, but eventually in the 1890s, there was a town. The vision was, we got to see the Yellowstone. Oh, my pathway to the vision is I'll start a town where people can live and they can see the Yellowstone. The Union Pacific Railroad, who had been one of the railroads, doing the Transcontinental Railroad, said, oh, people are excited about this. And they built a spur heading north so people could go to the Yellowstone. And that was the one that really worked and took off. So their vision was, people are excited, they got to see the Yellowstones. Their mission was, we'll build a way for them to get there. A vision of a transformed world, this is the way to get there. To be a witness to Jesus Christ, the 5 practices are a way to get there. Any questions, comments? This is the easiest one.
More than 7 words.
Yeah, we'll get through this and then we'll have some time for your questions and comments. The danger churches fall into in this process is they think, okay, we've done that. And we've checked the box, right? You never stop doing this. You never stop doing this work. You're constantly rethinking, is what we're about to do. This ministry that we just announced this morning, whichever one it was, is this some way that we're living into our vision of witnessing to Jesus Christ? How does this align with our mission? One of the books I'm sure when you did the Vital Church Initiative they gave to you was called Simple Church. Anybody remember Simple Church? And it had a four-stage process of things. That book's over 20 years old now. And the authors of the book, and it's one of my favorite books for doing this kind of work, because they actually went out and did surveying and actual studies. It wasn't somebody just giving their opinion like me this morning. and they actually did surveying, and they put together, you know, their process. And 20 years later, they did their work, and they kind of went back to churches, and they saw their successes, and they saw the ones that didn't work, and they highlighted the one area that churches were good at getting a clear focus of who they wanted to be, and they were good at clarifying and stating that out into the congregations of who they were going to be. And then the next stage was called alignment, which was making sure all of the things you do are in line with your vision. And if there's something you're doing that's not in alignment with your vision, you stop doing it. Guess which ones churches struggled with? The stopping. Churches,
We've always been doing it like this.
We've
That's
always
what
done
churches
something.
say.
but it's fun, and all of us like it. And that worked for a long time in our society. But if some of the things we've learned over the last 4 sessions are true, that we're in the midst of radical transformation in the culture and in who's going to be Christians in the next generation, with fewer Christians, the focus needs to shift from what we enjoy doing and what we've done to what are the people who aren't here looking for. Anybody gonna push back on me today?
Well, I'm in the process of reading, I haven't finished it yet. Same area you're talking about, John Wesley Powell's Descent of the Colorado.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's a
Very
great
interesting,
book.
but one of the things they bring out in this book is, in that era where there was a lot of geology, and the Colorado River particularly shows the absolute length of time that the earth has been here.
Right.
And that actually created, amongst some of the population, a lot of doubt about the Bible,
Yeah.
the things the Bible said and whatever. And to me, one of the things that the church can do is to not be so dogmatic about what we believe that we read in the Bible, but try to help to understand some of the questions that other people might have and try to figure out a way to help them work through those kinds of things.
Yeah, that book is really, you know, I was a geologist very briefly before I entered ministry. And it was one of the key resources for helping us to get past that biblical notion the earth is 6,000 years old. And what's really fascinating about it right now is that established this, you know, idea of geology as this long, slow, things coming in very slowly in process. And now geology is kind of maturing again and saying, wow, you know, there were a lot of catastrophic moments where things happened really fast in the history of the earth too. So it's sort of going through its cycle. What the church needs, this was something I wasn't going to get to, but the 3 things ending in TY: flexibility, integrity, and sustainability. If we're going to a time when there are going to be fewer people interested in churches, if we're going to go into a time that it's going to be a very different group of people interested in churches, then a church has got to be flexible, right? Willing to do new things, to try new things, to meet those folks. It has to have a clarity of who it is. We're in alignment where you folks have those doors out front, you know who you are. You've got to gotta hold on to that with integrity in everything you do. There are gonna be people who might come and say, hey, I'm a United Methodist, and they run out the door before you can say goodbye to them. Right? But you gotta hold on to your integrity. And then the next thing, and this is something I think we're learning all across our culture right now. We from the Industrial Revolution on, and really in the days of the post-World War II U.S. hegemony, we always equated bigger as better, and bigger is success. And we're learning slowly that's not so. If we're going to have fewer churches and fewer Christians, the goal is not going to be try to be like Chapel Point. There will always be some Chapel Points. I mean, I drove by there coming in today, and they're parking on the grass, because I think they went from 5 to 4 services or something like that. What's sustainable? Is your physical plan sustainable? Are the ministries you're doing sustainable? What are we going to do? If we all have a common vision that we're all on board with, then we're all going to back it with our time and our talent and our energy and our resources and all of those things. And if we're living out a very clear mission, not having 100 missions, not building the town, building the railroad, and painting 3-mile-long painting, if we have just one path toward living to that vision, then we're going to have something sustainable. And it may be 200 people in worship. It may be 75 people in worship. It may be in this building as it's currently configured. It might be in a different configuration of the building. It may be alone. It may be in conjunction with another church, that you have the same values, that you can do integrity. That's the goal to being a church that's going to, this is the tough language, that's going to survive 25 and be around 25 years from now. Because really, we have more churches than we need. I mean, there's a lot of grief in it. Okay, what are you going to ask?
Well, and if we're serious about living the example of Jesus,
Yeah,
many churches are living the example of the church.
yeah.
I mean, there was no Christian church when Jesus was on the earth. There was no New Testament when Jesus was on the earth. And yet we tend to take those packages and put them out front. So I think we have to recapture what was the essential thing that Jesus Christ did. And that's what we should be doing too,
Yeah,
whether it requires a building or not.
right.
I don't know. It's just,
Yeah, more and more churches are looking at post-building Christianity because they say the building's not an asset. Now, two things, I'll follow up on what I was going to say. There's a lot of grief I'm experiencing, not personally, but I'm observing among long-term United Methodists right now. This week we announced that there were 63 more churches coming up, and there was a lot of gasping out there among long-term United Methodists that many were going. And I got a few inquiries about it. But the United Methodist Church, with once upon a time over 1,100 churches in Michigan, maybe even more than that, was designed for the horse and buggy age. We haven't lived in the horse and buggy age for a century. We don't need all those churches, so we're reducing the number of churches is not the end of the world. What is a sustainable number so we can effectively execute our mission? So what is sustainable for you as a congregation? Couple of final observations. And again, we can talk about whatever you want as long as you want today. One is, know you're blessed. This is a congregation that has time. I was talking to a friend one time, a therapist, who was saying to me the hardest part of her job was marriage counseling. And I asked her why, and she said, because most marriage counseling fails, at least in her experience. And the reason it fails is by the time people come to her for marriage counseling, it's already too late. The damage is too far gone, and it's things. The reality is, again, personal experience. most churches, when they start thinking, oh, we gotta change, we gotta adapt, we gotta do something, they're coming out of it in crisis mode. And it's already too late. Look at your worship this morning. You had a lot of kids. You have a cry. Before you came in church, I said, I envy. I've never in my whole career had a choir like what you get to listen to here. Right? You've got time. You can think strategically as a church, but be attentive to doing the vision and mission work on a regular basis. Think, okay, we know what the future is going to look like 10 years out, 20 years out. What are the groundwork things we need to do right now so we're in a sustainable place as this comes? That's the good news. And the other piece that I think I look at it as good news is it's okay to take risks. What's the worst that can happen? There's a great movie, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I bet a lot of us have seen it when I was really too young. But it's actually, I think it's just a wonderful movie. Paul Newman and Robert Redford. I think that was part of its popularity. Yeah, the laughter tells me I'm right with that. So there is a scene, an extended scene in the movie, where they're these outlaws, and they've got their thing down, right? They rob trains, and then they go back to their hideout, and they're safe and secure there, and then they rob another train, they go back to their hideout, and if the law chases them, wow, that's okay. They have certain things they know to do to avoid the posses and avoid the law. They've been doing it for a few years. They're good at it. They've got it down to a science. And then one time, they go after one train, and you probably remember this scene. Another train pulls up behind it, and these guys come out on horseback, and it's a posse. And so they take off like they always have, only this time it's different. Right? They try all the tricks. They try, taking their horses down a river stream so that they'll lose the track. This posse's able to follow them. They get to a place where they divide into, the gang divides into two groups with Butch Cassidy and Sundance going one way and all the rest going the other way. The posse doesn't take the bait. They all follow Butch Cassidy and Sundance. They try the old trick where one guy, they're running, galloping their horses side by side, and one guy jumps onto the back of the other guy's horse, and one horse veers this way and the other, so the posse will have to split. I mean, they try it all. And everybody, these guys are the best of the best. They just keep following Butch and Sundance. And finally, they scramble up on a cliff, right? And they find themselves back into this place where all they can do, there's a cliff with a mountain river. They shot it in Zion National Park, where I haven't gotten to yet in my life, but I want to get there. And do you remember the scene? Yeah, but they're getting their guns out. They're ready for this is it. We're going down. These guys are going to kill us, but we're going to go down fighting, right? And they're getting ready to shoot it out. And suddenly, Paul Newman, right? Butch Cassidy, he has this, brainstorm, and he says, "We'll jump." Do you remember Robert Redford's response? "No, not going to do it." But we'll jump. We can jump, and we'll get in the river, and we'll get away. No, I'm not going to do it. And finally, he says, "What is this?" And the Sundance Kid goes, "I can't swim." I always meant to learn to swim, but I can't swim. Our churches are going to have to try and do new things, and you're going to learn how to swim, right? We're all going to have to learn how to swim, and I get it scary, but all of the old things we've done, they're not working the way they used to, and so we're going to have to swim. And if you remember the rest of the scene, when the Sundance Kid says, "I can't swim," do you remember Paul Newman's hilarious response? He laughs and he says, Oh, hell, the fall will probably kill you. There was a time when you literally, when suburbia American was going, you could plant a church and it was gonna go. And we did a lot of that. That's not the time we're moving into. There's no guarantee what will happen. When you, as a congregation, are ready to jump, there's no guarantee what's gonna happen. But boy, won't it be exciting to take that leap? And if you're gonna be examples of Jesus Christ, being willing to take that leap is about as beautiful an example as I could ever imagine, regardless of how it ends. Because you know what? All things end eventually. Question? Comments? Yeah.
I've been thinking about this concept of transform the world.
Sorry, what?
The concept of that is transforming the world.
Yeah.
To me, there's an awful lot of groups, movements, other kinds of things in our society all around that are trying to transform the world. But what do they want to transform it to?
Yeah.
To me, a better thing to say is seek eternal truths, rather than trying to transform people to things that I think that they should consider the truth.
We seek eternal truths is a vision statement. Now, here's the thing. You don't write your vision statement in a vacuum. It needs to be a representative group of the whole body so you can do the work to get to the vision that you all feel passionate about. Not the one you all say, okay, we've negotiated and this is where we are. It's the harder work of staying at it for as long as it takes until you find the thing where everybody says, I'm passionate about that. Because once you're passionate about it, then the time and the resources and the energy and the gifts and everything necessary to make it true will flow. That's the place. I'm not speaking to yours specifically, but that's the place where churches often fail in this. They think it's a negotiation. It's not. It's a searching of your hearts and your prayers until you all find a place where you have built relationship among each other strong enough that you are passionate about this. Because whoever that team is, whenever you get to the point of doing it, hopefully it'll be around 8 or 10 people at max. They become the people who, because they're so passionate about the vision, they become the virus that infects the rest of the congregation with the passion.
But to me, just the process of seeking truth, it's hard. But it does create people that want to do that. It creates community. They don't want to be told what the truth is.
Yeah.
They want to seek it, and you've got to interact with other people to do that. And to me, that's much of what the church actually does, is creates a community of seekers. It's not creates a community of people that all believe the same damn thing.
But that isn't what transform the world means in the context of our statement. It means, that's why the church has built schools, has built hospitals, has built clinics all over the world. It doesn't mean we want everybody to think like we do. It means we're trying to make their lives better in terms of health and welfare and that kind of thing.
I think like make the world more like the
Education.
kingdom
But
of
you
God.
didn't put
Yes,
it in
yeah.
7 words.
No, I cut it to 4. 7 words or less. Let me make an observation. What the 3 of you just did was the work of finding a vision. That's what you're doing. Oh, I hear this, but then there might be somebody representing, say, and I'm not saying they will or won't, but say you have a 20-year-old in the process, and they say, man, I'll tell you what, when somebody says truths to me, that's a turnoff. Because you know what? The people who are saying that, I see them in the media all the time, and that just turns me off like that kind of word. So then you have to continue your dialogue, you have to continue to go back and forth with each other until that group finds the vision that everybody in the group says, I guess this is okay with me. No, everybody says, wow, I'm passionate about this. That's the hard part of doing the work.
But the dialogue with that person would be useful,
Yeah,
because maybe he thinks there is absolutely no truth anywhere at all.
that could be. And so how do you navigate that as a as a collection of people to where you're gonna find the thing where you're both, how do you frame and find the thing you're both passionate about?
And, well, to me, that's also what I think useful about discussions like this.
Mhm.
I know, I get an awful lot out of Sherry's sermons, and we have a class where we review the sermon, we
Yeah.
talk about it and that kind of thing, but I think we need, as a population, as citizens, to figure out ways to interact more together and try to understand each other and where we're coming from.
I agree. Paula, you were,
I'm nothing.
okay. I'm sorry we didn't get to it.
Change.
Okay.
I can see
Yeah,
that
uh,
transformation of the world could be misunderstood, that a lot of people could think we're doing something totally different than
Yeah.
what he meant by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna make a comment about your opening story there.
Mhm.
I've been to Methodist churches in Texas, they might as well be Southern Baptist.
Sometimes, but there are other United Methodist churches in Texas that are just fabulous representations of things that I would want to be a part of. I can't think of, blanking on that guy who's got a Texas church in one of the urban settings. Oh, he's,
Woodlands or Highland Park or?
no,
In Dallas.
uh, he was the guy who went out among the homeless population and started inviting them to church and
Yeah.
said, if you can sit through
Rasmus, Rudy Rasmus.
Ruby
Yeah.
Crest, Yes.
yeah, sit through the service, I'll give you $5 or something like that. And, I mean, he just, that's a church I'd be like, I'm on fire for. And one of the dangers is, the observation here, is for us to say, "Oh, I don't like that, and ending up putting our energy into defining what we don't want to be instead of what we want to be. We live in a culture where we spend a lot of our time defining ourselves by saying, that's not who I am, right? Whether it's in politics or anything else. The real trick is to do the internal work and the community work of kind of shutting some of that stuff out and saying, who am I and who are we? Because that's where the passion is. If you define yourself by what you're not, eventually you get to a point where it doesn't work anymore. In post-World War II U.S. history, a lot of the definition of who we were was, we're not communists, right? And it worked wonderfully until suddenly the Soviet Union wasn't around anymore. And then it didn't work anymore. And you can actually see, if you kind of pay attention to our politics, there's a segment that's just trying to hold on to that, defining ourselves by what we aren't kind of approach toward life. And it doesn't work. It's the hard work of saying, who am I and what am I passionate about?
Well, that's partly why I feel it's healthy. That the United Methodist Church and the Global Methodist Church are coming apart, are splitting, because I just looked up the vision statement of Global Methodist Church, and it's nothing like that up there. And so, you know, if that's your vision and this is our vision, let's both go for it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
Blessings on you, you know?
Sure, I'll tell you, I've made some new friends, I've met some wonderful people doing this disaffiliation work. And I've heard people say, gosh, you're being so nice and you're so helpful and stuff, and almost shocked. People can have different values. That doesn't mean you have to see yourself as antagonistic toward one another. It's when we try to push our values on somebody else that the problem happens. That's why the internal definition, we're not going to define ourselves by what we're not, we're going to define ourselves by what we are, and follow those three.
You know, that
Yeah.
definition about what I'm not and what I am, that's biblical.
Yes,
That
it
was-
is.
That was like when the publican got up and I'm not like this guy, and I'm not like that guy. And the sinner said, have mercy on me, a sinner. Forget that guy over there. Let's try to work over here.
I'm going to steal that, Paula, for future conversations. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anytime I could go biblical instead of an old movie, man, that's that accrues to my benefit. Hey, thank you all for these 5 weeks. Thanks for being a part of it. Sherry told me, asked me if I'd put like a resource list together of some of the things. I will happily do that, some of the books and some of the places I've gone to, and I'll get it to her. Anything I can ever do when you're having these conversations, now or in the future, give me a call. This is the stuff I'm, as you probably guessed, I'm really passionate about, helping churches navigate and all that. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.